Todd Mendeloff, thank you for being here today with me. I was lucky enough to meet you because you came and taught us into Jose Caballer's community, the system about how to close $100,000 project. Maybe we can talk another time about how that's going for me. But I'm super excited to have you here because your experience is very unique. You have been on both sides of the designer client equation. You were an executive at creative agency Razorfish. That's where you met Jose. Right?
That's
You
right.
raised
That's right.
there. Then you've been an executive at Disney for a few years. Then you launched your own media company, Fast Company name, the most innovative company in 2016. You successfully exited the company, and then you've been working since as a fractional exec, and you also have another project, always about media. It's called Zugazi.
Right, right. Zugazi is
Right.
a mobile first 3D visualization company.
Amazing. So tell me a bit about yourself and what a day in your life look like as of late.
Myself, the top line is I've spent my career mixed between media entertainment technology, between professional services and management, and being a co-founder, building and growing companies. But about half and half between corporate and the startup world. And like building stuff, like creating stuff. And as part of that, we've built a couple of good brands that stood out in the market. And like we were talking about with Wisecrack, helped help us succeed, and then help us, be differentiate and be able to exit in that case. So, brand is, I see, as an incredibly valuable asset, and is something that I think about, you know, every day with the current company with Zugazi on one way or the other. Obviously, that's not always, it's about adhering to kind of our core brand values and our core sensibility and our positioning, but how that manifests across what we do on a daily basis, whether it's product or marketing or partnerships or what have you.
And tell me about what a day in your life looks like nowadays, working as a fractional
Well,
executive and running your own
most of my,
company. Yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, really, I'm CEO of Zugazi,
So guys, okay,
and
that's your main focus now.
yeah, that's right. And most of my time is split up wearing a bunch of hats, whether it's working on the product, working on fundraising, a lot of that right now, working on recruiting talent, and partnerships, getting traction, all that sort of stuff. It's a cross section of that on a daily basis.
Interesting. Are there any milestone insights for your company?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Are there any milestones in sight for your company?
Well, raising our seed round is going to be a big milestone for us. We've been able to make a lot of traction in the absence of that, and had a big studio as a design partner that helped us, advance our product and get some important traction, including within that company as well as with the Directors Guild of America. We're included in a big annual innovation day that they do. But all that is importantly informing and leading up to us putting together our seed round, along with bringing in some more talent. We're just in the midst of bringing on a super talented CTO who I think is going to really help us in broadening the scope of our core team. So we're excited about that.
So looking at Zugazi, or even just zooming out and looking back at your career, what would you say is your what do you consider your greatest achievement to date? What is the thing that makes you the most proud of when you think about it?
With regard to Zugazi, I mean, it's no question our product. I think we have a really, really importantly differentiated product in a space that is really valuable. 3D visualization is an incredibly valuable medium and tool set in certainly in TV and film and commercials. We see it going, it goes beyond that. We see our product going beyond that, but making a product that is accessible and streamlined that everyday professionals can use without loads and loads and loads of training and spending months and months behind a desktop learning the ins and outs of incredibly powerful programs, taking nothing away from the Blenders and the Mayas and the Cinema 4Ds and others of the world, but they're dense and they're intimidating. And we saw an opportunity, we see an opportunity to be able to put a 3D tool that lets people easily visualize, much more easily visualize in a streamlined way in their hands. And that gets reinforced, kind of every time we demo, every time we share the product, and we think that there's a big audience out there, particularly in TV and film, clearly for us. I shouldn't say maybe not particularly, because we think the audience is even bigger. Clearly in TV and film and commercials, people that have been doing physical production for their career, who really have never gotten behind the desktop part of the world, they always have to farm that part out to the extent that they're using it. And our tool, Viz Pro, puts the product in everyday professionals' hands so that they can conceptualize, they can use it in a really robust way, or they can use it in a simple of a way as it being a 3D notebook for them of like, hey, here's the idea I have. And it's incredibly powerful to be able to illustrate that idea and move a camera through that space and through that scene to help talk to your collaborators, to the folks on your team that might execute that shot with you, or even to get things on the level of animatics, or we're working on animation right now. Ways in which to leverage the combination of our product along with existing workflows, whether they're traditional workflows or AI workflows, to make really incredibly fun, cool stuff happen, visions come to life in a way that was a much harder hill to climb previously. Fundamentally, answer is our product. Also proud of what the team has accomplished, and proud of our brand is one of the things we were talking about in advance of this conversation, and coming up with a brand that is distinctive. There's a lot of people in this space of tech and media and creative. I'm proud of the brand that we've built and that we're continuing to build and develop. I think it lays a good foundation for us, and has iconic quality to it. It's fun, it's friendly, but I think it's a good fit. So we're proud, or I'm proud, of all that stuff.
Amazing. Um, I was curious. Let's stay on the product a little more, because I'm curious to hear if there's a specific kind of person that is using Zugazi and how they're using it in their day to day. You say it fits nicely into even kind of a traditional workflows, but I'm wondering if there's a specific kind of person that is attracted to the brand and the product right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have the gift and the challenge of being a powerful product, but being a bit of a multi-tool that um, we're continuing to learn ways in which it can be useful, and that it can apply powerfully, for be used powerfully for uh, all different kinds of folks. It is really speaking creatives, right? And again, out of the creatives that work in with video, with motion, uh, uh, and that create story, all of that, even outside of the TV and film space, we think that this is a tool set that, again, this multi-tool quality that it has, that can be really valuable to creatives, broadly speaking, creatives, like into other markets. We have an advisor who comes, initially out of kind of the engineering and manufacturing space, and then into later into a big consumer platform for immersive environments and games and that sort of thing. And he looks at that. He looked at our product early on when we started talking, and is like, I think you're totally right to focus on what you guys know, but I think you've got a bigger audience here. I think that there are, just like what you see in TV and film around um, physical production folks that don't know the desktop tools the way that all the desktop filmmakers know them. There are those same folks in the engineering space, right, who need that sketchbook, right, who need that ability to visualize something very easily and very quickly, just to get a view at something or just to share an idea or whatever it might be. And they don't have it. They're like everybody else in this space. They have to go to the person who knows the desktop
As the
tool.
specific skill.
Right. And that person's busy with honestly more complicated stuff often, you know? There's an aside, but I have another friend who works for city government in Arizona in communications, and his job is to work with urban planning folks to work with communicating with the community about planning that's going on in that city. And when we were just catching up, and I showed him what we were doing. He's like, "Can I use this now?" Because like being able to show people what we're going to do would be incredibly valuable to me, and being able to get the CAD guy, who's working on this on a daily basis, but he's doing more complicated stuff, or in his view, more important things than knocking out communications assets for my team who communicates with the public, would be really valuable, because they got better things in their mind to focus on than my thing, and they also just think about it very differently. They don't think about, whereas my buddy Rob thinks about, how does the audience take this in, and how does this community, how do they understand it? And a lot of times, like, they're making street changes and stuff like that, and the people don't understand what we intended until it gets built, right? Like, oh, now I understand what you were trying to explain to me a year ago, or 6 months ago. So there's not it's a broad cross section of people that are doing kind of creative and in certain ways communication, and visualizing and innovating and all of that. We remain focused on TV, film, commercial folks, because our team is a bunch of filmmakers and technologists that come out of that world and see and understand that world and see that need and see a real problem there that we can solve. That's who we think about on a regular basis, but we also benefit from the fact that by thinking about them and their needs, a lot of the other use cases, like my friend Rob, or talking about some of the kind of mechanical engineering communications needs, or it could be education and training, what have you. Those all are kind of subsets of the set of use cases that we see in TV and film and commercials.
Right. That's super interesting, because if you want to build a company that makes a lot of money, a very successful company, that make the product and sell it to everyone. If you can sell it to everyone, it's better than if you can sell it to just a small segment of people. But then that poses challenging for marketing and brand and messaging, etc., because it makes it just more expensive, and many times exponentially more expensive.
I mean, way we think about branding is, one of the lessons I took away from my days long ago at Razorfish was, um, a consumer brand. Thinking about your brand like a consumer brand, which I think the founders there, Craig and Jeff, were really nailed. Was they landed on what was a brand that had a consumer sensibility, but was in a business to business space, and everybody else in that space, and all the other competitors in that space, had these business to business sounding brands, and that's what they looked like, and the names were weirdly similar, but it was a great lesson for me, right? Of like, you know what? If you think about people, like, in the end, people are people, and like a consumer brand, the notion is that it's iconic. It's, got a friendly quality, to it. There's an approachability to it, and that, you can still fulfill all the things you need to fulfill as a business, of being serious. Like, we are about business, as a business to business brand, while still being approachable, right? And still having an iconic quality to it. There's a lot of business to business brands that kind of take this position of being, say, like a think tank, right? Or something like that. Like, oh, we're serious. We're very serious. And there's nothing wrong with like you should be serious about like your execution, but you can still be approachable. And we've really focused on that, and that we want to differentiate, we want to be memorable, and that those qualities, in even with a broader audience, all those qualities still accrue value to the brand and to the company.
And how are you doing that? Like, how are you presenting yourself as more approachable? Is it
Yeah,
your messaging, your visual language?
yeah. I mean, really about I think about our visual language. Well, I mean, I think we're balancing those interests, right? Through, things like our visual language. We have
Yeah,
as part of our icon and part of our identity. Animals are pretty friendly. We have a sound mark, that goes with that cat, but also goes with filmmaking that combines those two together. So that's there and that's playful. But in our positioning, we make really clear what we are, right? And that like this is, for you to be able to be mobile first in this 3D space. We're saying, you don't need to. It's a little cheeky, right? Because we don't mean it, in an absolute kind of way, but we have this positioning of ditch the desktop. The desktop is we're not going to get it ditched, right? I mean, what you can do, in desktop, in a desktop application and big rendering farms and all that, you're never going to be able to do on a mobile phone. So it's cheeky in that respect, but we're serious about like the ability of making this tool set really accessible, to large audiences. Millions of people, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people can really benefit from being able to, take a 3D element, place it, whether it's an AR space or VR space, and be able to move around it the way that they can, in just, regular plain old space, right? And to not have to put a headset on and to be able to capture that and take that video and use that video in their workflows or use that video as their output. All those things are super valuable, and we're very serious about it. And we have a product is a good, powerful, strong, impactful product. So it's the balance of those two that I think come into play. So it feels approachable, it feels friendly, feels like, oh yeah, I should be able to. New technology, no matter who you are, when you're using it for the first time, is challenging, right? I mean, there's a small group of people that don't get anxiety from brand new technology, right? Even when it's the easiest
yes,
stuff
right.
in the world to use. We think the brand plays a really valuable role in that, but then once you get into the product and just use it a little bit and say, oh God, this is, I can do something. I've been shown in 5 minutes how this thing works in its most fundamental way. I can do something and demonstrate something really quickly. I never thought would be able to do that. Like I haven't seen a way that I could do that in the traditional, 3D tools. So it's the intersection of all that stuff that makes it work.
Great. More practical question. Tell me a little bit about your team makeup. Do you have creative roles on the team right now, or do you work with external uh,
External,
contractors? All right.
I mean, well, that's not quite true, right? Let me rephrase that in the sense like that. I think you're talking about with regard to graphic design and branding and all of that, right?
Yeah, as writing, copywriting, too.
Right. We have a very talented creative team as part of the founders. Like I said, we've got TV and filmmaker folks as the founding team, and they're using the tools to and a lot of those folks are actively working in production, having come on, working on series right now, or having just come off one and in post and going on to another, and using Viz Pro, our product, in those environments, to their benefit and the benefit of their productions and all that sort of stuff. So very much in that regard, yes. With regard to to copy,
Day-to-day operations, like,
right. With regard to to graphic design and copy and the implementation of the website and stuff like that. In fact, our mutual friend Jose helped us execute on putting our website together within the sensibility, and we used. I mean, shout out to Core, right? We
yes.
used Core. I mean, because we're both familiar with it. It's pretty fast because I've done core many times. Core grows out of some processes and methods that we used at Razorfish. So we were able to go through it, pretty quickly and achieve the sensibility of what that should look like. But Jose has been part of it. Another former, we got shouting out Razorfish folks all over here. Another former Razorfish person, Daniel Jennett, who's also helped us on motion graphics. But we're keeping it lean as a startup, as you might guess, but we don't have those tool sets in house. I talked to previously about my previous startup, Wisecrack, where I had the great benefit of
Yes,
my
that's
my
yeah,
co-founder, who was a CEO and a graphic designer, and that was unbelievably valuable in his ability to switch on the dime to go from total business stuff to design stuff, is incredible. And I've never seen anybody be able to do that kind of thing with that kind of skill that he has. But that was incredibly valuable there. We don't have that right now in what we're doing, but we're figuring out how to do that and make it work, for us. That will be an evolution. Unfortunately, I have good friends like Jose and Daniel and others who, I can turn to and work with, to make really good stuff happen. And we have a shorthand because of the background that we have, and we can, get stuff done, really impactfully and faster than I probably, a lot of folks could. So proud of in that category of things I'm proud of that too.
amazing. So yeah, I see this happening over and over again. Especially, it makes a ton of sense for startups just starting out, especially looking for investment in very early stages to work with external creative partners. But I think the takeaway here is if you're launching a company and you can find yourself a creative co-founder, would you say that that's wise advice?
It's really valuable to have somebody like that in the mix. Like, obviously, we're blessed with lots of it back in the day at Razorfish by nature of design being a key part of what we were doing as a company that was developing product for lots of people. And we were preaching the importance of brand and how brand gets manifest across all touch points. So it's unquestionably super valuable. It was valuable, really valuable with Wisecrack, no question. I think that we had a brand that stuck out in a great way and really reinforced who we were in a very special way that added value across the whole business. I think that if you can, that's great. I think that depends on the business, right? You need to figure out kind of what business that you're in, how you're going to go about tackling that, the value that every founder brings into that mix, and all of that. Good branding, I will say all day long, good branding matters, good positioning matters. Thinking about that, figuring out how you do that and how you do that, particularly when you're young and small and needing to be lean, right? And in an effective way matters. How you play that out is going to just depend on kind of the cards that you're dealt and what you can make happen for yourself. But making it happen, being able to being able to stick out, differentiate, and have people remember you. I think about the name of our company. I think about our logo. I think about our sound mark, and I think about all those things, and they all fit together nicely. One or a couple of those things are things that stick out in somebody's mind of like, right, that's that company with the Z, right? Or, oh, they have the cat, or they've got that sound mark, or all of that. And as opposed to like, yeah, which one of those, AI platforms, is it like, I don't like, gotta, I don't even remember. I don't even remember what website to go back to.
Thing. Next, I would like to hear about your experience. I don't want to get you sued. Just share what you can. But what I like to hear from you is you've been again on both sides of the equation. You've offered creative services. You've built companies, doing it for yourself. How should company like what advice do you have for company to budget for investments in brand creative design and if you see this like how do you do it today and if you see it changing into the near future? We could talk about AI, but that's not necessarily where I want to well.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a changing landscape because of AI. I think the quick aside about AI is I don't think AI is likely to generate, um, you might be able to get something reasonably professional looking, broadly speaking, right? But a lot of times brands get defined at the edges. How they differentiate gets defined at the edges. And because of the nature of AI, right? Big difference is you'll have something that you might be able to get a logo generated that, is passable, like looks broadly professional. The difference there is everybody's going to have a logo that looks broadly professional now. It used to be like, oh, you could kind of differentiate, the the kind of not so professional from professional pretty easily because a professional graphic designer had to be involved. The threshold is now, instead of at the floor for those logos that are from Microsoft Paint, although some people can do incredible things in Microsoft Paint.
Yeah, it's true.
Um,
I've seen it.
um, or stock logo junk, right? Is that floor is now, at a much higher threshold. So it looks passable, but it's going to be, I think what will happen there is the things that are kind of look passable, because that will become the standard, right? Are in short order not going to stick out. It'll really stick out if you haven't bothered at all, right? But you're going to get to a place where everybody's going to have a pretty decent, identity, and it's going to be passable. And if you don't, it's really going to be like, why aren't you bothering? This isn't that hard, to the point where, the next level up, defining your identity, defining your brand, like I was saying, oftentimes happens at the edges. Your ability to work with those tools, to, at least right now in my experience, is that those tools working, getting very refined stuff out of those tools is quite hard. I want those to be elm leaves, not oak leaves, right?
Good luck with
um,
that. Yeah.
right. And then being able to make modifications to it, of like, fun little things that, like, think about Google's search page, what they do with seasonality and events and that sort of thing. And like, if you're trying to do that sort of modification, think, oh, I've got this great marketing idea, we'll get some attention, and whatever it is. Like, if you're counting on AI to do that stuff for you, and you want something specific, right? You're not gonna, in my experience, it's gonna be harder. Be a lot harder to reliably get what you want. You have to make concessions to your tech. That's one of our themes for us, is like, there's a place, if you want it, there's a place for AI in your workflows for sure. Again, if you want it, but if there's my view, a better workflow that makes the technology a more clear partner to you and your intent as a creative. It's a big part of what we're about at Zugazi, is like maintaining creators' creative intent, not not having the technology take over the creative intent, and then you're making concessions to, like, well, I guess, like, I've tried 16 ways here, I've prompted 30 times, and I keep getting XY problem. I'm gonna just cave and do it the way that the tech wants
Yeah.
it done,
The AI
right?
ones. Yeah.
So so anyway, so that's I think where things are with, the impact of significant leveraging the AI. I think in the absence of that, you can get better intent, like, or not in the absence of it, but in the collaboration and proper collaboration with it having the proper place, and designers, for all their skill and their talent, bringing what they can bring to the equation for you, and what you can get to explore, because of that. And that, back to the differentiation, like differentiating, your identity, your logo, your palette, and bringing innovative thinking to that, new, like, AI is trained on everything that's come before, right? So inherently, right, it is challenged. It's not impossible, but it's a lot more challenging in certain ways than what a human designer can bring to it. So I think that it's important and invaluable, but I think it's also, there's a place where the two meet and where things can go faster, because combine the best of both worlds without, again, caving to to, making concessions to your tech kind of thing.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, the tools are indispensable today, but I agree with you. Like getting something finished out of them. I just came out of a session with Gemini where I asked it like 20 times to change the ratio of an image, and it just cannot do it. Like the simplest of inputs. We're still a long way. I work assuming, like my philosophy is assume that AI will get there one day and very soon. So if you live in that assumption, in a way, for me as a designer, it kind of helps me question where do I bring the most value into um, my relationship and my work.
Right.
So
I
I'm
think it's really smart.
working. So that's where I come from. So yeah, it's fun to say that ChatGPT doesn't get the most basic of commands, but I think it's good to assume that it will.
I think anticipating it, I don't know how soon it will, right? I mean, I think that, look, I mean, I maybe have an above average knowledge set, but not a superior knowledge set when it comes to AI, right? I mean, it kind of depends on how big of an audience
It's
we're talking about there. But, I think that, you know, the AI companies, there's a lot of incentive for them to talk about AGI, right? And
yeah, yeah, right.
a lot of incentive for them to have their investors believe that AGI is within their grasp.
Yes,
I think it's an incredible, I think LMs and the state of AI, which I don't even think should be called AI, to be perfectly honest.
I agree with you. I
I
agree
don't
with
think intelligence should be, I think it's incredible and taking nothing away from it. I think it is a absolutely amazing advancement in UI, right? Like the ability to, even with it being often, right? The ability to interface with a computer with, voice or chat, is pretty amazing. And in a way that, we all suffered through, voice recognition, call centers for 25 years, right? And how miserable, they were. And we know how bad that could be. So to have that change, that's pretty amazing. And what those responses can be, and that they're accurate a decent amount of the time, is all pretty neat, right? But to your point about change the aspect ratio, right? It's just straightforward evidence that there's no thinking going on there, right?
yes, yes,
There's
yes.
no, like, the idea, like when they're using these human brain kind of terminology of like, oh, I'm thinking, or it's intelligent, this is AI, right? It's pushing a sensibility of the tech onto everybody that it really is a brain,
Yes.
and it's, instead of just being, oh, it's really impressive tech, but it is not thinking, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If it was thinking, aspect ratio should be pretty straightforward, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
It's like,
I
that's
agree.
not that tough.
They did an amazing job with their marketing, kind of convincing us that AI is just a baby. And today it can do 1+1, and tomorrow we'll be able to do 2x2, and the day after tomorrow will invent the theory of
Right.
everything. But that's not the necessary, that's not the natural
Well,
evolution of this
right.
technology.
And I just don't see it. I mean, the huge advancement was the LLM interface, right? And
Yes,
that was dropped on us 4 years ago now, right?
right. Time
Publicly.
flies when you're having fun.
All right. And the advancements since then have been cool, but nothing like the difference between,
No, yeah, no
no LLM
ChatGPT
and
and
an LLM,
ChatGPT. Yeah.
right? But people are, to me, there are people who still think like, "Oh, we can make another leap like
Yeah.
that,
Any
right?
day, right?
Any day. And it took years for us to figure that out. I mean, I have this conversation, different, but self-driving cars. Like, we've been promised self-driving cars now, right?
Yeah,
For 10 years, 12
yeah.
years, right? Oh, they're 6 months away. They're 6 months away. It's like the nuclear fusion of
Fusion.
right. And it's not that I don't know if we'll ever be able to achieve AGI. Maybe, but I just don't think that it is. I think it's unlikely that this is like, oh, tomorrow it's going to be, it's just going to happen, and then suddenly, you know. So back to the original point, right?
Yes.
These guys are really, there's a lot of incentive for for all the big AI companies to focus on like AGI's, just around the corner. It's going to happen any minute now, and we are the path to that, right? Which may or
Don't rehire the people you just fired because we're almost
right,
there.
right, right. So, but I think staying aware of it, figuring out how it makes sense to use reliably, uh, in your practice. I mean, I think one of the many cool things is explorations, design explorations, right?
Yes.
Like being able to like, oh, well, it used to be like, hey, I want to see what this looks like. And that's a half day, couple day, a week long process. And you then get on the other side and like figure out, oh, that didn't work, and that's just one of those things. So like the ability to at least get some snapshots of what those explorations might look like, even if the snapshots are like, meh, they're not great, but they do they let me speed up my exploration process, right? What would that look like in this? It's a little harder to tackle, but in this, in this typography or that typography, this font or that font, with the recognition of like, if we want to make that into a usable asset, right? I then need to make that into an Illustrator file, right? Or I need to make
Yes.
that into a Photoshop file or whatever it is. But your ability to do, kind of explorations, it like just as one simple example, right? And to do things like, storyboarding, explorations, just kind of broadly, right? The work that it used to take to pull those assets together and like be searching and searching and searching and searching and find like,
Yes.
it's really incredible, right? It's that part of it, I think, gets lost in the weeds between like, oh, I can prompt a video into place, right? Even if,
Agreed.
which is its own neat thing, but also doesn't, I think that a lot of people don't appreciate how much perseverance is involved and like the being very particular about everything that is in a frame, whether it's, graphic design or video or whatever it is, and how it all looks and is it right or not. And it's also one of those things that I think changes as people spend more time with it, right? As people, I mean, I'm sure you've had this experience. I've had the experience of, I get it, something generated by AI and, oh, wow, that looks pretty good. And then you like zoom
Yeah.
in a little
Then
bit
yeah.
and it's like that
I can
thing
show
that's
this to anyone.
right. That's not even a shape. It just looks like a shape from where I was. Now, or it's a shape. It's not even an object, right? It's just kind of a blob, that made to look like a flower pot. But when I
Suggestive
get,
or something. Yeah.
yeah. So, and I think that people's eyes are going to get more aware of that.
Tune, yes, 100%.
And then, I mean, I teach a class and I had a marketer and marketing executive from one of the other studio from Universal speak to my class last night. And we were talking about this exact thing about people, seeing AI assets, right? And they're just not, they're not acceptable to audiences. Audience see them and they don't like them, you know?
Yes.
And there's a whole other story there of like, interested to know. I don't know if anybody's doing studies on what people's interest and appetite is for. There's a lot of for just broadly speaking, like even in storylines, right? AI storylines is like, are they unappealing to people? Right? Is the whole idea of kind of, let's mimic ourselves something that, it, it'd be like the movie Her. It'd be really interesting if Her, right? How Her would do today versus what 11 years ago, 12 years ago when it came out, right?
Yeah.
Would people
That
still,
was
it was pretty
that was prophetic
impressive.
at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
So, okay, amazing side quest into AI. I
Yeah.
think we touched on
Sorry.
some very
Sorry about
interesting
that.
points. No. It was actually it's great. It's great. It was a very interesting conversation. Back to my question was about budgeting. I'm sure you've seen budgets that would make some people's heads spin in your career. But more than the numbers, that's not really the point. Is how have you seen company budget for their brand design and creative? How do they invest? How do they calculate how much they invest? How do you do it maybe today? And if you see
Yeah.
this, how do you see this
Unfortunately, I have
going
to do
forward?
it. I'm like, I mean, in the startup space, you have to do it. You got to figure out how you do it inexpensively. In the case of Wisecrack and Zugazi, having teams of people that are involved to have some orientation to it really helps just a ton. So it's easier for us to get away with being able to keep those budgets relatively lean. I've been both on the professional services side and on the corporate media side, on both sides of those conversations from a branding and brand development perspective and all that sort of thing. And um, those budgets can, I mean, both in the good and the bad way, right, make your head spin. Um, it's in a really big media companies, big brands, right? See a ton of value in what they're investing in there and what the benefits of that are. The AI component is just everybody's expecting that there's some benefit to being able to leverage AI to execute that work. I don't mean designing a logo, right? I don't mean like putting together the brand brief, but for example,
Taking care of the
helping
media needs, right?
helping understand the needs, right? Like you got 5 executives that you want, or a committee that's involved in kind of informing that positioning with the agency that they're working with, that pulling that used to just be a bunch of work just to pull all that information together, and to summarize it and organize it in a way that, again, good value for those tools to be able to like, oh, it's one of those things that tools seem to do pretty well, right? Like here's at least a draft of the brief, and working from a draft to then say, okay, this is helpful in certain ways, but it's not all that helpful in terms of really sorting out what our strategy is. But it might sort out like here's 4 different takes, 4 different potential takes. Okay, I get some iterations there, but now I'm going to pull my best human creative directors together, right? And, get them to bring their insights and how this differentiates and all that. The, the budgets, and it's an evolving landscape, but like from talking to folks that are still on the corporate side that I know, some they're expecting to see some benefits from being able to leverage that. Right? Oh, well, we can get things done faster. Well, we should be able to see, our ability to execute XYZ branding project or identity project or what have you, even if it's from a project management and account management perspective, right? The tools are better, right? The tools are better. It's easier. The ability to archive these things and to pull reports together and all that. It's just easier than it used to be, even if we're not talking about any of the creative side of it. So, I think my sense is that they're wanting to see how that value accrues to them and what you're doing with them. And, I think that it's your ability to think kind of expansively about it of like, yeah, I can do this I used to take an 8-person team. I can do it with 6 now, or I can do it with 5 now because I don't need, there's a different value proposition question, but I need only 1 coordinator instead of 2, right? Because being able to sort through things and pull information together is a lot easier than it was previously, or whatever it might be.
So would you say that budgets are shrinking, or there more is expected out of the same budget, or both of them?
I think both can be true, but I really, I think that, and it's going to depend on the industry that you're working with, because some industries they're shrinking, right? And because they're shrinking, like that's just a reality of like working in an industry vertical, right? Because they're shrinking, but they still need to be conducting business, right? So you got to be aware of that of vector. What I generally think is, this may be an optimistic take on it, right? But instead of like, hey, I just want to squeeze out more money, any corporate environment I've worked in, there's never been a shortage of projects that people want to engage in. Like the company is always like, now we can't afford that project. We can't afford that project because we just don't, we have to be aware of our bottom line. So, you know, I think about a lot of this stuff is like it opens up the opportunity to do more business, right? I can do, that user engagement product or process or method that I had like wanted to be able to explore. I now that was hard to prioritize within the confines of the budgets we were working with. Now I can do more. You get on both sides, on the client side and on the professional services on the agency side. Like you can get more done with fewer people, but I think there's more projects that get to be done. You get to, if you can, if a project manager, simply enough, right, can be spread across 3 projects instead of just being devoted to one because of the tool set that they have, right? That is, they get to do more stuff. I mean, I think there's a proposition there where that's good for everybody. I mean, as a project manager, account manager, creative, whatever you have, the more clients and more projects you get to work on, the more you evolve, the more you develop, right? You get to, solve more problems. You get to add more stuff to your portfolio. I think that, well, individual budgets on projects, can shrink. There's still like
An
companies
abundance
come
of
up with
projects going
more
around.
projects to do. And it's not, it's not all about like, hey, we must, and not saying there won't be companies that try this at some point. Hey, we can shrink our marketing budget by, we can shrink our X budget, by 20% because somebody who's strictly focused on bean counting, right, has said, hey, we should be able to realize this, as opposed to the flip side of like, well, yeah, but if we spin the dice more, if we're not so focused on pairing, but if we're focused on like, what else can we do to gain user traction? What else can we do to gain user engagement? Push more chips in on that hand in a good way, right? As opposed to saying, I'm just going to be, I'm going to place a smaller bets. There's a boldness, I guess, that it can enable that as long as, I mean, I think part of it from an agency perspective is finding that sweet spot where you're a great partner, right? When you're seen, you are being, and you are seen as a great partner to your like, you're a key part of this. You are our, you know, our uh, y- y- you're the person that we look to provide our brand oversight, and when you're coming in and saying, hey, I think you could do better on this, let me show you what that could be, and that, you have that relationship with the managing director, the CEO, the director, whatever the role, is, in that unit or in that company, to be able to, say, let me bring you value. Like, let me help you, you know, grow your business. That's all in that mix. It's just the landscape is changing, benefiting every direction. I think every direction can benefit from the use of the tools, that are out there, and just not sticking your head in the sand and being like, it's miserable and I'm scared, right? It's okay to be scared, right? But like not sticking your head in the sand.
So let's say that with Zugazi, and of course it will happen, you raise the amount of capital that you need. Is the kind of is this the kind of relationship that you just described? Is that what you will be looking for, or will you probably look more at growing your internal team?
I know we'll continue to with our seed raise. Well, brand will be important, and positioning and identity and all that is going to be important. It's something that everybody's mind is on. We'll continue to work with outside resources in that at that stage. I would say once we are happy with the traction that we have, and it's time to scale, is when we begin thinking about bringing in, a building that team internally. But I think that, my general experience is, having worked for a few big companies, um, there's a lot of benefit from being able to leverage outside brains on any subject matter expertise, right? Some things are, you're going to be you're going to own that in your company because you have found that nobody seems to be able to do it better, right? But it's super valuable and super important to be aware of like, well, no, like we can benefit because, these outsiders are more dialed in, to what's going on in the market, and they bring up a fresh point of view, or, they bring some kind of innovation to and value to your thinking, and that there's a real value in being able to bring those folks in. I mean, when I back doing professional services stuff and was Intel was a client, and we they had a couple agencies of record, and they, I mean, from the outside perspective, I never got this confirmed from them internally, but they brought us in on a project, and it seemed to be, they wanted, yeah, they're happy with their agency's record, but they wanted to bring another perspective. They wanted to bring in, maybe light a little fire under their agencies. I think might have been part of it. Can't say for sure, or might have just wanted another take, or maybe couldn't get enough capacity from their agencies. I don't even know. But, big at that time, one of the biggest chip makers in the world. I mean, I guess they're still pretty big, and they, wanted the consistency of those agencies of record and that standing relationship and everything that benefited from, but also like, hey, let me bring in another voice. So, there's a lot to be said for how you manage internal teams, how the internal teams leverage external teams, and how that all works together. And that kind of varies by leadership and outlook, and kind of, the way that companies problem solve and all that. It'd be easy for me to like say it's just one way, build it internally or only completely go externally and all that, right? It's
Yeah, that's great insight. This was a great conversation. I want to wrap up on one thing that you said
sure.
before. Maybe with a thought this week, it would be great to wrap our conversation up. You said something beautiful is that brands get defined at the edges, and I would like you to elaborate a little bit on that. But if I got your meaning, and maybe you can just riff off what I'm about to say, is that in the future, brands will get defined more and more at the edges. All brand will be defined only at the edges.
But I wouldn't say only. I wouldn't say
Mm,
only, but I guess the point. I guess part of what I'm trying to say is like there are the qualities that all or most brands should have, right? And if you're thinking about these like a Venn diagram, like those things, overlap, right? Every auto manufacturer should have there should be just like a pretty big set of characteristics and reputation points that overlap across all of them, like, reliability and build quality and innovation and, what have you. And then there's the part of that Venn diagram that doesn't overlap. Some of that is like historical, sticking with the auto example, like some of that's historical reputation and that kind of thing, and that sort of stuff. But some of it isn't. Right? And it's those parts that don't overlap. Where like that's where you're different in the consumer's mind. But in the absence of the part where if you only get the differentiation part right, but you don't have the part that's the Venn diagram overlap, right?
yes.
You're gonna shoot yourself in the foot, right? If you don't have good build quality, if you don't have a fresh line, things like that, those things that just consumers come to expect is like, oh, if you got to have this stuff to start, right? And if that stuff if you don't have much that differentiates on that edge, right, or that differentiates on the edges, but is also crucially is not easy to recreate, or strategically isn't a good thing to recreate. It can be, I'm not telling you anything you don't know or people listening won't know. It's like there are plenty of businesses that either choose to differentiate by being the budget option, right? And that's their difference, Ryanair or EasyJet, what have you, right? That thing, and then along with that comes seats that don't recline, and I gotta, pay to bring in a carry-on and all this other junk, right? But that's if you choose to be that guy and compete at that level, that's actually pretty easy to mimic, right? if you're choosing to be the innovator, right, and offer something that is different and appealing to a sizable audience, that can oftentimes be harder to mimic, harder harder threshold to entry. So it's just a useful framework, to think about brand with. I think we're grateful to Zugazi that we have a product that differentiates really strongly, you know, on its face, and that there's things that, we've chosen to embrace from the outset that we believe. Like it's not a function of like, oh, that's a good strategy, so we should embrace it, right? It's we think that there's something very powerful about being able to work in in 3D space on a mobile device that you're very familiar with. Not have to put a headset on, not have to be tethered to a desktop, and that's the edge in the larger 3D visualization world. That's the edge in which we differentiate. And I think that that's an important, from a strategic perspective for any company, an important place for them to think about how they're approaching their products and their business and their positioning and all that.
Amazing. Super precious insights. This was an amazing call, Todd. Do you think we missed
Felice,
anything?
thank
Is there
you.
anything? Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time, and hope to see you again soon. To talk to you again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Great talking to
Ciao.
you.
Thank you.